everything you think you know about survival is wrong. You see, nearly all instruction on the topic revolves around not dying. Our focus is going to be on living. Everybody dies. Everybody watching this right now will die. But for Christians, death is gain, for then we will be with the Lord. Until He calls us home, we realize there is a purpose for our continued existence here. Paul said in Philippians 1:23-24, "I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is far better, but to remain in the flesh is more necessary for you. I want you to have the knowledge and confidence to meet your own needs, so that then you begin to look to the needs of others." This kind of confidence cannot be placed in adequate preparations or sufficient fieldcraft. For as Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 12:12, "There is no end to the making of many books, and much study wearies the body." Instead, my goal is to equip you with an agile and active mind, capable of adapting to the ambiguous environments that you'll find in a survival situation, and resting completely in the peace to be found in the sovereignty of our Lord Jesus Christ. Does that mean we shouldn't prepare? Absolutely not. Proverbs 22:3 and 27:12 say the exact same thing. "The sensible see danger and take cover, but the foolish keep going and are punished." So while you prepare, your preparations should enable you to meet the physical needs of others as a means of addressing their spiritual needs, just as Jesus did during His earthly ministry. Come on inside and we'll talk about some more specifics. In today's episode, we're going to discuss 6 types of man-made disasters and how best to respond or stay safe during each one. Romans 3:23 says that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Though we are all predisposed to making mistakes, certain men decide to embrace violence as a means for imposing their will on others. Regardless of their intentions, these violent actions have extremely negative effects on a large portion of the target populace. If you can effectively mitigate these negative effects towards yourself, you will be better equipped to assist with the suffering of others. If we can get enough people to alleviate the suffering of others in a timely manner, it is entirely possible that we may prevent the violent actions from achieving their ultimate goal of imposed behavior change. The first man-made disaster we'll discuss is chemical weapons. I use this term also to include toxic industrial chemicals, or TICs. This is a population density map of the United States by county. Areas with higher population densities are the most likely targets for chemical weapons. These areas also generally have a higher degree of industrialization, which increases their risk of chemical hazards. Chemical weapons provide little to no early warning, depending on type of agent and dissemination device. There are 4 main types of weaponized chemical agent: blood, blister, vesicant, and nerve. Depending on the climate and agent, you may see a cloud, but most weaponized agents are colorless and odorless in their pure form. Chemical agents will most likely be employed during the summer months and during rush hour or events with set times that attract a large number of people, like sporting events, rallies, and fairs. Most casualties from chemical weapons are the result of burns, dry land drowning, and other metabolic effects. Symptoms of exposure can include tightness of chest, runny nose, dim vision, headache, nausea, vomiting, seizures, burns, blisters, coughing, tears, and drooling. If you observe many people exhibiting these symptoms simultaneously, it could be evidence of chemical weapon exposure. If you believe you have been or will soon be exposed to chemical weapons, take a deep breath and cover your eyes, nose, and mouth, preferably with a respirator designed to filter out such contaminants. Worst case scenario, use a wet rag. Cover all exposed skin and get to higher ground, moving perpendicular to the wind. Start a large fire and get as close to it as you can. Throw anything you can do without into the fire as a means of decontamination and making a bigger fire. Scrub or submerge everything else, including yourself, with a 10% bleach solution. Understand that many chemical weapons form caustic acids when mixed with bleach, so use generous amounts of running water after the bleach scrub or bath. This technique will also work with most biological weapons. Like chemical weapons, biological weapons will also most likely be targeted at higher population density centers. Biological weapons provide very little early warning, depending on the type of agent and dissemination device. There are 4 main types of weaponized biological agent: bacteria, parasites, viruses, and toxins. They can be employed any time of day, any time of year, but will most likely follow the same employment guidelines referenced previously for chemical weapons. Most casualties from biological weapons are the result of metabolic effects and dehydration. Symptoms of exposure can include fever, fatigue, coughing, ulcers, difficulty swallowing, sore throat, cramps, sweating, chills, and joint pain. If you observe many people exhibiting these symptoms simultaneously, it could be evidence of biological weapon exposure. The effects of biological weapons is often not as sudden as chemical weapons exposure. As biological weapons are usually an amplification of naturally occurring pathogens, it is difficult for health monitoring systems to attribute an uptick in symptoms to biological weapons in the absence of other intelligence. This slow response time means initial exposure victims have a much lower rate of survival than those who are exposed second or third hand. If you notice symptoms in others, you're most likely already infected. If you believe you have been or will soon be exposed to biological weapons, take a deep breath and cover your eyes, nose, and mouth, as well as open wounds. Get indoors, unless the release originated indoors. Once inside, soak towels, blankets, or clothes in a 10% bleach solution. Use the soaked material to fill air handling vents as well as the cracks under or around doors and windows. As a further precaution, duct tape cellophane on top of the soaked material. This technique will also work with most chemical agents, although ammonia will work better with some cyanides than bleach. Practice good personal hygiene and sanitize your living and working quarters on a routine basis, especially areas devoted to animal handling and meat processing. Actively manage the pest population. That means kill as many fleas, ticks, lice, mosquitoes, and rats as you possibly can. This is a map depicting the nuclear reactors in the United States. Though they are designed to keep all radiation in, their very presence increases the likelihood of radiation exposure, especially in the aftermath of a catastrophic event. This is a map that depicts sites which are most likely targeted by enemy nuclear weapons. If you live near one of these sites or a nuclear reactor, you should become acquainted with how to mitigate the effects of radiation exposure. Radiation provides no early warning, but it is easy to predict. Incidents releasing radiation can occur at any time of day and any time of year. Most casualties are from DNA damage, burns, and compromised immune systems. If you believe that you have been or will soon be exposed to nuclear radiation, cover your eyes, nose, and mouth to prevent dust and particulate matter from getting in your lungs. If there is a blast, don't look at it. Get inside. Shut all doors, windows, and vents. Remove your clothing, including shoes and accessories, and put them in a large garbage bag. Tape the bag shut, and then take a shower, scrubbing thoroughly with soap. Put on a new set of clothes, preferably from a closet or dresser, and then place the plastic bag with your old clothes in the garage or attic. Start an iodine regimen and stay indoors for 48 hours. If you're downwind, stay indoors for at least 1 week. A single forage attempt may be made on day 7 but it should not exceed 10 minutes in length. Another forage attempt may be made on day 14. It should not exceed 30 minutes. Monitor those who go outside for symptoms of exposure to include nausea, hair loss, and burns. If you vomit within 1 hour of initial exposure, you have most likely received a lethal dose of radiation. Anyone who enters your shelter should be rinsed off with running water and a good mechanical scrub. Make sure that the water drains away from the shelter and does not pool or spread. There are 3 aspects to reducing your exposure to radiation. The first is time. Every radioactive particle has a specific half-life at which there is a 50% chance that the particle will have undergone nuclear decay. This means that if you wait for a full half-life, the radiation dose should be cut in half. If you wait another half-life, the radiation dose should be cut in half again, a total 75% reduction. Half-lives vary depending on the isotope and can range from nanoseconds to decades. The problem is that most radioactive particles will decay into other equally hazardous particles. The bottom line is wait as long as possible to expose yourself and limit exposure time when possible. The second aspect of reducing radiation dosage is distance. If you double the distance from a source, then you have effectively cut the dose rate by a factor of 4. The problem is that you will rarely come across large chunks of radioactive material, but instead be exposed to particulate matter that acts very much like household dust. At all costs, you want to prevent the inhalation of these particles, as you cannot increase the distance from your own lungs. The third aspect is shielding. While lead is usually mentioned as the optimal shielding material, other materials can be nearly as effective, such as water, styrofoam, and wood. Just get as much material between you and the radioactive source as possible. High-power electromagnetic pulses are typically generated by nuclear explosions, solar flares, and other specialized devices. This is a map depicting the EMP effects of an airburst nuclear weapon depending on altitude. EMPs provide no early warning and are difficult to predict. They can occur any time of day, any time of year. EMP effects will directly cause casualties through failed life support systems and vehicle accidents. The much greater danger is the second and third order effects. Though battery, solar, and generator backups are common in most applications, absent timely and thorough maintenance in response to an EMP, many systems may experience interruptions or failures. Some of the key systems that may fail include train crossings, refrigeration, communications, and air traffic control. The greatest danger from EMP is natural gas transmission lines. SCADA technology monitors pressure, temperature, and flow, as well as humidity and other variables in these lines, and is highly susceptible to EMP. Because of their ubiquitous and often remote nature, explosions are highly likely. Only a fraction of cars and trucks will experience any EMP effects, however. Those that do need simply pull to a safe stop and restart their vehicles. You may encounter conventional explosives or their effects during a man-made disaster. If you see a device, warn everyone in the vicinity and leave in a calm manner. Do not attempt to disable the device unless you have received the appropriate training. There are 3 main hazards from a conventional explosion: blast, flame, and shrapnel. Blast is a shock wave of energy, often sufficient to break glass and knock a person or vehicle over. Second-order casualties from the blast result when a person is thrown against a hard object. To prevent blast effects, either get behind something substantial, like a cement wall or building, or lay down prone. Burns are a common source of injury related to conventional explosives. To prevent burns, cover exposed skin with material that resists melting and ignition. Specialty fabrics have been designed for such purposes, but if these are not available, fabric soaked in water will suffice. Burn treatment is covered in another episode. Shrapnel is any object accelerated by the blast, usually by designing something metal, to penetrate body, tissue, or construction material. If the device is small enough, it may be possible to contain the effects of the explosion, for example, dropping it into a river or pool or covering it with a heavy piece of metal. However, you run the risk of initiating the device or simply adding to its effects. Your best course of action is to facilitate the orderly evacuation of personnel in the area. As you leave the scene in an orderly manner, please beware of secondary devices. It's become common practice for secondary devices to target concentrations of fleeing civilians or arriving first responders. Violent mobs can occur any time of day, any time of year. Casualties from violent mobs are generally caused by projectiles, riot control agents, and blunt force trauma. Try to avoid crowded areas and constantly look for alternate routes or exits. If you are confronted with or find yourself in a violent mob, take these steps. Get inside. If you can't get inside, cover all exposed skin and remove any article that resembles a uniform. Wear something to protect your head, such as a bike, hockey, or motorcycle helmet. Walk, don't run. Running will only highlight you as a potential target and decrease your reaction time to stimulus. If you find yourself in the middle of a violent or rushing mob, do not try to fight against the general direction of movement. Take slow, deliberate measures to move sideways to the edge of the crowd as you continue heading in the same general direction as the rest of them. The communication system will most likely suffer as a result of natural or man-made disasters, either from overuse or loss of power. Take these steps as an attempt to establish communications. Immediately place a call with your cell phone. Then, send a text message with your cell phone and remove the battery. Try the landline and then attempt internet modes like email, chat, or video conference. Turn on scanners and radios. Try your cell phone and landline 4 minutes after the event and 20 minutes after the event. These periods historically have lower call volumes. A common response to disasters, especially among those who believe in a God, is to question how an all-powerful being would allow such a bad thing to happen. It is also one of the most common reasons given by agnostics and atheists for why they have chosen their particular philosophy. There are several responses to this perplexing question. The first response is founded on the transience of this world. Psalm 103:15 and 1 Peter 1:24 both equate man's life to grass, here today and gone tomorrow. The material world can and will fade, and since we are here for such a short period of time, this position asserts that we shouldn't concern ourselves with physical destruction that may literally occur nanoseconds before the rest of the known universe follows. Despite being logically valid, this is a callous position and fails to resonate with non-believers. The second position is that God really isn't in control. Why does a good God allow bad things? He doesn't. He made the world and everything in it, got it ticking or spinning or whatever metaphor you wish, and then sat back to enjoy the show. Well, let's set the record straight once and for all. God doesn't allow things to happen. He makes them happen. It is only by His perpetual and gracious will that every atom is held together at the quantum level. Job 9:4 says, God is wise and all-powerful. Who has opposed Him and come out unharmed? Which leads us to the third position. The reason you question why a good God allows bad things to happen is because you have forgotten what it means to serve a king. Jeremiah asked God, why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why do the treacherous live at ease? How long will the land mourn and the grass of every field wither? Because of the evil of its residents, animals and birds have been swept away. God's answer is one of my favorites. If you have raced with runners and they have worn you out, how can you compete with horses? Habakkuk also asked the Lord, how long, Lord, must I call for help, and you do not listen, or cry out to you about violence, and you do not save? Why do you force me to look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Oppression and violence are right in front of me. Strife is ongoing and conflict escalates. This is why the law is ineffective and justice never emerges. For the wicked restrict the righteous. Therefore justice comes out perverted. And God's answer is nearly the same as what he gave Jeremiah. To paraphrase, if you think this is bad, wait until you see what's coming around the bend. The bottom line is that whatever we are experiencing, no matter how awful, it isn't as bad as what we deserve. I stand before you and declare that I deserve to burn in hell for all eternity, and so does every single person listening to my voice. But because of Jesus' loving sacrifice, I don't have to, and neither do you. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and gained the skills and knowledge that will enable you to fulfill the Great Commission before, during, and after an emergency situation. As a quick review, the 7 aspects of survival in order are planning, medical, shelter, defense, water, food, and utilities. The phases of survival are preparation, the event itself, immediate actions, aftermath, transition, and sustainment. Remember that survival is a mental exercise played out in the physical realm. Sustained survival is a team sport. Security is an illusion, and people are depending on you, even if you haven't found them yet. Prevention is the best medicine, and ultimately, survival is about moderation and living in that paradox that can often be difficult to find. As 1 Peter 1:13 says, set your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ.